All right, we're learning the Mishnah on page test. Hey, Shirky. We're learning the Mishnah on page Ayin Test Amid Base, which is 79b-1 at the end in the art scroll. Last week we finished off. We had the question of Talmud Sanhesrin, but I sent it an answer in the WhatsApp that Reb Talmud Sanhesrin was learning about. We were talking about the opinion that says that you don't. The yeshiva of Chizkiah says they don't pay money if someone kills someone by mistake. So according to the rabbis, if you meant to kill, all the components are right. Just you hit the wrong person. Like if you meant to strike the husband, you strike the wife. So according to the rabbis, then that's the case of nefesh tachas nefesh. The pasuk that says that you get a life for a life means you put the person to death literally. Rabbi Shimon, who says that even in such a case you don't put someone to death, so he has to translate the verse to mean that it is money, that you pay money, the value of money that I guess you figure out some way or another through maybe the price of slaves, how they evaluate people's value. So it's a monetary value. But Rabbi Chizkiah says you don't pay money because he learns a pasuk that says when it comes to a person, maka ish, so it's always about life and death. It's never about monetary. And when it comes to damaging someone's animals, it's always a monetary question. So he says that you don't pay money because it's not a monetary case, and you don't get put to death because you didn't intend to kill the woman, you meant to kill the husband. So we asked, what would Rabbi Chizkiah do with the verse nefesh tachas nefesh, which says clearly a life for a life. If you don't pay money or you don't get put to death, what's the verse talking about? So Rashi, for some reason, does not address that question, but Tosfos does. And Tosfos at the end says that the Talmud Sanhesrin would have to learn the verse in a kind of what they call a doichik. They would have to kind of push the verse to the boundaries to mean that you intended to kill the woman. That if you didn't intend to kill the husband, but you intended to kill the woman, then you get put to death. But if you didn't intend to kill the woman, you hit her by mistake, or you hit her with the intention to kill someone else, then you don't get put to death. So that's how Talmud Sanhesrin. That's we left off last class. We had a question on the pasuk according to the opinion of Talmud Sanhesrin. So I just wanted to mention Tosfos asks that question and answers that it means that you intended to kill the woman. And in such a case, even Rav Chizkiah would agree that you get put to death because that was your target. Okay, now we're going to a new case. So I just wanted to wrap that up. We're going to a new case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says like this. But we're dealing with a case of intermingled, where people or things get mixed up, and what do we do? Because we don't know who the murderer is, or what have you, or if we know the murderer, we don't know what their rule is. So how such a case could happen in a practical way is not so easy. But with animals, it's easier. You don't know the difference between one animal. But with people, it's kind of more difficult. But let's go through it. The Mishnah says like this: Reitzeach, someone who's a murderer, shinis arv ba'acherim. We'll see Rashi says, what does that mean? He gets mixed up with other people, intermingled with other people. So we don't know what that means. That who are these other people? What have they done wrong? Or have they done anything wrong? So the rabbis say kulam b'turim. We don't know who the murderer is, and people are intermingled. So that's it. Everyone's off. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Omer, he says koinsin oisin lekipa. There was a way. What they would do is we spoke about this before. Not every case of murder, even if the Torah says you don't get put to death according to the Bezdin, they would put you in a situation where you died. And that's called koitzinois lekipa. They'd put you into a confined space. And in that confined space, they'd feed you foods that you were limited. You were like in jail, basically, in prison. So they would feed you foods that initially would cause you to, or they would hold back food, and then they would give you certain foods, and then they'd give you like a barley, and the barley would react on an empty stomach, and you would die from the types of how they fed you, you would die. So you didn't die according to Bezdin. To me, that seems like a pretty horrible death. But that's what they would do. So according to the kippah, they would put him or her into a kippah, into a confined space, and everyone would die. So the question is why? I mean, who are these other people? If just one person killed, and in what scenario are we talking about that this person is a murderer? And how don't we know who everyone else is? So we have to understand the scenario, the argument between Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis. The rabbis say that if we don't know if they're intermingled, and because we don't have certainty, so we have to let everyone off. And Rabbi Yehuda says no, we put them all into a kippah, into confined space, and they kind of eat their way to death. Kol chayat, now so that's the argument. So we continue the Mishnah. The Mishnah says 79b-80a. Kol chayavi misais, everyone who is has to be put to death. So you have, let's say, they've already been sentenced. A few people have been sentenced with different types of deaths. Now, we learned before the deaths are not all on the same level. Some are more severe than others. So kol chayavi misais, they get mixed together. Nidin bekala, then we go according to the most lenient. Means if you have a few people that did different sins, that the Bezdin said this person has to get hanging. This person has to be beheaded. This person has to be choked. This person has to be burnt. This person has to be stoned. So we go with the most lenient of the four. And he gives an example because we have an argument. This is based on the argument we learned about a few months about a year ago. Haniskalim b'nisrafim. Let's say you mixed people that had to get stoned with people that have to get burnt. So which is the more lenient? So Reb Shimon says that nidim beskila. So they both get stoned because according to Reb Shimon, stoning is the less severe of the two. Of burning and stoning, stoning is less severe, burning is more severe. Shasreifa chamura, because burning is more severe. We learned this already, this opinion. The rabbis say no, the burning is what they get because shaskila chamura, because according to the rabbis, stoning is more severe. So Reb Shimon, again, this is a mission that we've learned already in the Gemara. Reb Shimon, the rabbis, hey Ariel, so Reb Shimon says to the rabbis, if burning wasn't more severe, so we learned that if a daughter of a Kohen who's engaged, who has relations outside of her engagement, so her punishment is unique with burning, whereas a regular woman who is engaged, and it's called a Naira Ursa Beisavia. So she's engaged, she still lives in her father's home because she's not yet married. So her punishment is more severe than just a regular married woman who's in her husband's home and has an affair. That's her punishment is stoning. And a Bas Kohen gets something more severe, which is burning. So Reb Shimon says, from here we see clearly that burning is more severe. We've learned this again. So the rabbis answered Reb Shimon, that no, they disagree. Nevertheless, stoning is more severe. They would have not given it to a person who curses God, God forbid, or a person who serves idols, which these are very severe transgressions. So we wouldn't give them stoning, we would give them burning. So from here we see that stoning is more severe. So each one according to their own, and therefore, according to Reb Shimon, if you mix two peoples that have been sentenced, one to burning, one to stoning, they go with the stoning. According to the rabbis, they go with the burning. What about, and the same argument we have on the next two types of death penalties. Those who get beheaded with those who get killed by choking. Again, Reb Shimon says that the sword is the least severe of the two, and therefore we give them the sword. And the Chamim, the rabbis say chenek, the choking is the least severe. Okay, so therefore, we have basically two parts of the Mishnah. The first part of the Mishnah is that a person who is mixed with others, which the Gemara, we're going to have to figure out what the others are. Then the rabbis say that everyone gets off, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, we can't put anyone to death with any of the death penalties of the Torah, but we could confine them to death, which is we put them in a kippah. And then the next part of the mission is about if we have people that have already been sentenced to death, we go according to the least severe of the punishments, and that's an argument. Which one is it? Reb Shimon holds burning is the most severe, therefore stoning, and if it's in a case of beheading and choking, so then a beheading is the least severe, and choking is more severe. So let's just see Rashi. We're going to learn these Rashis on the Mishnah quickly. Rashi says Shinisar b'acher Gemara mefarish hanachacher maninu. The Gemara is going to explain who these others are. So it says koinsin oisei likipa. We put them in a confined space. So what does it mean? They put them in a confined space. A kippah means like a box. If anyone, I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Alt Nishal in Prague, till today. I mean, not till today. When I was there in 1993, they had a kippah. The kippah was like a little box. You couldn't even stand in it. and that had bars, and that was where the rabbi would sometimes put someone in there if they needed a night off. So it says koin tzinoisi lekipa, v'sham achil oisim sa'orim achidibaka kirisan. They would feed them barley until their stomachs would, so to say, give in. We're going to learn about what is the way they dealt with people in the Kupa later on page 81, side 2. Okay, the rest of the Rashis are just explaining the Mishna of the severities of the different punishments. Okay, let's go to the Gemara. The Gemara says like this: Man acherim. Who are these others? Meaning, what are these others that we're judging them? That according to the rabbis, that they get off if one person who killed someone, or someone who killed someone. So the Gemara says, Man acherim. Who are these others? If we want to say acherim ksherim, that they're just regular people, they didn't do anything wrong, and he got mixed in the crowd. The murderer mixed himself in the crowd or herself in the crowd. So pshita, that's obvious that you can't kill a whole bunch of people, because if there's 100 innocent people and one of the people is a murderer, you can't kill everyone. And if you don't know who it is, nothing you can do. You have to let them go. But so another question is, we can't say that the other people are ksherim, that they're innocent people. Why? Bahal lema Rabbi Yehuda kointanais in the kippah. Would Rabbi Yehuda say, just if you have 100, even if you have two people, one person you know is a murderer, you don't know who it is, would you put the two people in a kippah, in a confined space, and kill them both, starve them both, or feed them both certain foods to death? What did the innocent person do? You can't kill an innocent person. So therefore, can't be talking about innocent people. So it says Amar Simon b'Sharak. That's the simon of what we're going to say now. So he says Amar Rabavo. Rabavo says Amar Shmuel in the name of Shmuel. Hacha, it's talking about B'Ritzech Shlei Nigmar Dinoi. Shinisar v'Bereitzchim Acherem Shnigmar Dinoi. Actually, an opposite case of what seems like to be the meaning of the Mishnah. That here we're talking about a murderer who we know murdered, means there's all the qualifications for him to be a murderer. There were witnesses, everyone's there. But before they had a chance to pass judgment on him, he ran into a group of other murderers. So the other murderers already been sentenced. And they're supposed to get whatever the punishment is beheading, I guess, for a murderer. And now, but we have one person there who hasn't finished his judgment yet. And we don't know who that person is. So because they haven't yet issued the punishment in front of that person to say that you're a Ritzach and therefore you get put to death, so you can't issue the death penalty. But in the meantime, everyone in that group is a murderer. The 99 people, or the 3 people, the 5 people already been sentenced. But because one person hasn't been sentenced, we can't give him the beheading. So therefore we do. So the rabbi said we have no choice. We have to let them all off. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you're letting a murderer off. They're all murderers. So Rabbi Yehuda says you put them into the kippah, you put them into the confinement, and they get fed to death. So he said, Amram Bavar Mishmul Hachaber Tzech Shenigmar Dina Shinizar Bereitzchim Acherem Shenigmar Dina, that a person who has not yet finished the sentencing was mixed with other murderers that already have been sentenced. Askinan, that's what we're talking about. So Rabbanan Savrei, Rabbanan, the rabbis hold Ein Goimrim Dina Shel Adam El B'Fanav. We're going to learn according to Rashi. According to Rashi, Rashi says El B'Fanav, that you can't finish a case unless the person is standing in front of you. And Kivan the Ein, Rashi says, I'm reading the Rashi, Kivan the Ein Makir Noisai, they have B'Fanav. Rashi says simple. Because the person right now is not in front of you, because you don't know who that person is. You can't look at one person in the eye and say, you have now been passed a judgment. And you can't go to each person, you've been passed a judgment. So the other commentaries learn this differently, but we're going to just do what Rashi says. We'll learn how Rashi says that you can't say that the person is there's no person to stand in front of you. So therefore you can't pass judgment, and there's no and you can't sentence. And the rabbis don't agree with Rabbi Yehuda that you even kill them in a way of placing them in a confined space. Hilkach kulam paturim, therefore they're all let go. Rabbi Yehuda says, Miftre legamri namiloi, to let them all off just like that because you haven't yet sentenced them, even though you heard the witnesses, you heard everything. So we know there's a murderer over here. We just haven't yet been able to articulate his sentence. We're not going to let everyone off because of that. Namiloi, kivan deroitzcheninu, they're murderers. Hilkach, therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, koin tzinois in the kippah, we put them into this confined space. Okay. So that's the argument. That's how the Mishnah is understood according to the father, according to Avo Amr Shmuel, according to the Shmuel. So our Mishnah is talking about that the rabbis say that even though everyone pretty much committed murder, but you haven't sentenced one of them yet, therefore you have to let them off. And Rabbi Yehuda says no, we don't let them off. We don't give them the death penalty, but we give them a different type of death penalty by putting them in this confined space. Reish Lakish says no. We're going to turn now to the page 79b-3. So Reish Lakish says no. We're talking about the Adam, the Kuli Amalei. Reish Lakish Amar Ba'adam, and it indicates of a person that gets mixed up with other people. The Kuli Amalei Pligi de Patre. Everyone agrees here. According to Reish Lakish, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, in such a case, you would not kill the murderers because they haven't yet passed sentence. He says, Rashi says, the patre hoyel v'ikachad, because there's one person in the individual, he or she, nigmar dina, we haven't yet finished their sentencing. There's no better way to find a merit than this one, where you haven't yet passed sentence. And because and there's a limud, there's a pasuk. Means the pasuk, according to Reish Lakish, we use the pasuk. The verse in the Torah says, "Rachman Amr Vatzilo Eida." You have to save the community. And what does it mean, save the community? The Torah wants, like we learned in Rambam, and we learned many times, Torah does not want the death sentence. You have to do it if you have to, but a court that sentenced more than one person in 7 years was considered a murderous court. So any scenario that you could save the person, we try to save the person. Not again. The judgment will come in another way. And here we have to save the community. Why? Because you haven't yet passed judgment. So therefore, Reish Lakish says, even the Rabbi Yehuda would agree that you can't just put them in Takipa, even though technically you had, like the Rashi before says, we heard the witnesses and we discussed it. We just didn't pass judgment and the person jumped in. It could be, what could be a case where that such a case happens is people who look similar or twins or what have you. So he says that, so according to Reish Lakish, even the Rabbi Yehuda would agree that no one would hold that we have to kill or even put in a confined space and feed to death these individuals that are kind of intermingled. So what is the Mishnah talking about? Our Mishnah is not talking about people, it's talking about animals. We're talking about, and this is now according to Reish Lakish, actually the case of the Mishnah makes a little bit more sense. We're talking about the law is that if a ox kills someone, right? Kills that has to be put to death, and that ox get mixed up with other oxes that already been sentenced to death. So here we're talking about animals. We're not talking about people. And this is the argument, Kamiflagi. Rabbanan Savre, Kimisas Abam, Kachmisas Ashar. The rabbis learned that we have a limud, a verse that teaches us that how we view the case against the owner of the ox is how we view the case of the ox. And therefore, if the owner in such a case would get intermingled with other individuals, even if they were all sentenced to death, the owner would not be sentenced to death. So even though it's not a person, it's an animal. So nevertheless, we have to let all the oxen off according to the rabbis. And because of that, you have to be able to pass. You have to look at the cow and say this cow is being sentenced to death, and it's not here. Therefore, they're all let off. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda says no, that we put them into confined space. Why? What would be the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda? Because we also have a verse that says that you have to stone the ox. So you have to put the ox to death. And here the ox can't get let off. He doesn't say that just because the owner would get let off and the owner would need to have past judgment in front of them, so to the ox. He says we don't go to such an extreme. Here we know that all these oxes committed murder, killed people, and therefore, okay, we don't know who the ox is, so we're not going to stone the ox, but we're going to put them all into a kippah. Now the question is, what is the kippah? There's different arguments of different. There's a lot of rishonim that argue what does this mean. Some people learn that it means like the case of how we learned before, that they starve the animals to death. And therefore they let the animal, they don't feed them food, but they just starve them to death and they all die. According to Rambam, I think, and others, it's not that we kill the animals, we just lock them up. Part of the reason of locking up an animal is the animal has already proven himself to be itself to be a danger to society. So therefore, we say, okay, we're not gonna kill the animals, but we're gonna put them all in a farm, and they can't leave the farm, because if we let them out of the farm, these animals will kill other people. So it's just a restriction on the animals to keep them out of society. But there's different opinions. Not everyone agrees that would be the ruling in Court Reish Lakish of Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rava says like this. We're turning the page to page 80a1. I hope you don't mind. We're not going to go through all their. If you look over here, there's a long Tosfos and a lot of opinions, but we're just going to learn the Gemara simply. If that's okay with everyone. It says Amar Rava says. So Ihachi. According to Ihachi, what's Ihachi mean? According to this, meaning Rashi says, what's Ihachi? Bein l'Reish Lakish, bein l'Shmuel. Whether according to Reish Lakish that the Mishna is talking about a case of animals, that the rabbis say we let the animals go because we don't know what there's no one to sentence, there's no animal in front of us to sentence, and it'd be just like its owner. And Rabbi Yehuda says we can find it. The reason why it would make sense according to the opinions that when Rabbi Yehuda says by the animal we can find it, that it means to starve it to death, because we're talking about in a case where every animal committed murder or killed, and so they have to be put to death. Now, the question would be the rabbis. Why would the rabbis allow for a technicality if Rabbi Yehuda is just coming to prevent further damage? So that would be the rabbis should agree with that technically. Why would the rabbis disagree with such an opinion? Hey, Lord, why would the rabbis disagree with such an opinion? It makes sense to confine the animals that are causing trouble, right? So that's why some opinions hold that Rabbi Yehuda holds that they put the animals to death, and the rabbis say no, you have to let them off. There's no theory, there's no discussion about confining the animals to prevent them from causing further damage. But here Rava asks a question like this: Ihachi, let's see the Rashi. Rashi says, what's the question? Bein l'Reish Lakish, bein l'Shmuel. Whether the opinion of Reish Lakish that says that we're talking about that animals get mixed up, intermingled with other animals, and therefore that's the argument between the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda, or Shmuel that says that it's talking about a murderer who has heard testimony, etc., that gets intermingled with other murderers. So because we don't have the person in front of us to pass judgment, therefore the rabbis say they get off, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, the fact that they've murdered is enough of a reason to put them into confinement. So Kamaisiv Rava asks, Ihachi, the Hanya Cherem de Masnisim de Roitzchin Kamar. If you want to say that the others of the Mishnah are either animals or people that murdered, and the person that killed, Shinis Arav, Behukar, Ubelsaif Nisarav, that first we knew who this person was or this animal was, and then it intermingled. Now we can't identify who this person was versus the other people. Haditani Allah bebraisa. Hachi Ritzeach Shinis Arav Bacherem. That we have a brisa similar to the Mishnah that says, and I'm reading all from the Rashi, that a murderer that gets mixed with others, Kulam Peturin, all of them are let off. And Amar Rabbi Yosef basically makes a comment on that, according to the rabbis. Afilu Abba Chalafta Beineim, even if my father Chalafta was amongst them, this is Rabbi Yosef ben Chalafta. So even if my father Chalafta was amongst them, Kulam Peturim. Maya Afilu to Amar Rabbi Yosef. So the Rav is saying that doesn't make sense. If you're saying that everyone's a murderer, and the question is that either the animal was a murderer that didn't that we can't identify, and amongst other animals that we knew that killed, or it's a person that murdered, but we can't identify him or her amongst the other people that he or she intermingled with. So why would Rabbi Yossi say that even if my father was amongst them, or his father was a righteous person, why would he say such a statement? What does that statement even mean? Let's see it inside in the Talmud. Ihachi, Rabbi says, if that's the case, according to Shmuel, meaning to say that the others are murderers, and therefore that's the chiddush of the Mishnah, because if, like the Gemara says in the beginning, if the other people were innocent, what are we supposed to do? We can't just kill everyone because some of the animals are because some of the people or the animals are, one of them is a murderer, the rest of them are innocent. What would be the theory to kill everyone? So this that we learn in the Brayso, Rabbi Yosi adds, Afilu Abba Chalafta b'neim, even if one of the others is my father Chalafta. Chalafta was a righteous person. So therefore, we can't be talking about that the person who's being accused or has been tried but not completed the trial for murder mixed amongst other people means the murderers. His father Chalafta wouldn't be a murderer. That statement makes no sense. Elamar Rava says Hachikamer. This is what the Mishnah means. So this is the third opinion. We have Shmuel, which talks about a murderer who has not yet been sentenced, who mixes and mingles amongst other murderers who have been sentenced. According to Reish Lakish, it's an animal that killed a person that gets intermingled with other animals that have already been sentenced to stoning. That's the punishment. So Amar Rava says, Hachikamer. Shnaim shayoimdim. This is the Mishnah. If you have two people, and a bullet goes out, or an arrow goes out from one of them, Vaharag, and it kills. Shneim B'turim, we don't know who the murderer is pater. Now, we could just run through this case, but if you analyze it, it's a kind of a complicated case. We just because in order for a person to be sentenced, you have to have warning. So who did you warn? Let's say unless you were talking about, let's say two people are holding a gun, or two people are playing with a gun is small, but two people are playing with a large weapon, right? In an army barracks, right? And you say, listen, guys, both of you, we're warning you. If you're gonna touch the wrong, you're gonna touch a trigger, you're gonna kill someone. And a bullet goes out, but you don't know who touched the trigger. So there was warning. I mean, you have to figure out a case where it has all the other components to sentence the person to death. The only thing lacking is we don't know who the person is. So he says, Shnaim shayoimdim, two people that are standing. The and an arrow goes out from them. V'harag, and someone gets killed. Shneim B'turim, they both get off. So the acherim is that a ritzech shinis arav b'acherim is not talking about a case where a person killed as an individual alone, and before the sentencing gets mixed up with other people. We're talking about in the act of murder, the murderer was mixed with other people. We don't know who the murderer is. Right? They have a case recently with Alec Baldwin with the gun. I don't know if it's a similar case, but that same idea. You're trying to figure out, it's a loaded gun. How did that go off? So on that, Rabbi Yosi says, Amar afilu Abba Chalafta b'neihem, even if my father Chalafta, which everyone knows is a righteous person, and the other person that's intermingled with him is a horrible person, let's say a convicted murderer. So you'd say, okay, the most likelihood is that the murderer killed, not Chalafta. So Rabbi Yosi says, no, that even if we have almost certainty, because of the righteousness of Chalafta and the past record of the other person, that's not enough because we don't have clarity of who shot. So according to Rav, it totally changes the case because there's a lot of weaknesses to the murder case in the first place. We don't know who the murderer is. We don't know. It's hard to warn them really. And what was the scenario? So Amar Beis Afilu Abba Chalafta b'neihem is considered. They get off potter. Shor, what about a shor? Rava says, and what about an ox? Shenigmar dinoi, that has already been sentenced. Shenisar b'shvar macherim, and it gets mixed up with other oxes. And he adds to this, and if an ox whose verdict was already sentenced because intermingled with other innocent oxen, we stone them all. So according to the rabbis, that in case of an ox, we would stone all the oxen. And Rabbi Yehuda, we don't stone the oxen, we put them into a box, into a confined space. According to the different Rishonim, whether that's in a case of that they get killed or they just get cut out, they get taken out of society. And so that's how Rava learns the Mishnah. So Rava kind of learns the Mishnah in three cases. The first case is of two people that a murder comes out from amongst them. So then we let them off. And the rabbis say that a ox that gets mixed up with other innocent oxes, similar to this person, there's two people are murderer. Out of two people, one of them is a murderer. We let them off. When the oxen, according to the rabbis say, and we'll see Rashi in a second, that we have a mitzvah to stone the ox, and we have an ox that's a murderer. And so that ox gets mixed up amongst, let's say, 5 other oxes that did nothing. So you would say, okay, whatever, there's other oxen that are let go. But because already, you're going to see Rashi says already the oxen can't be eaten and they can't be used as sacrifices. So already we've already taken them out of certain abilities to be part of the regular life of a cycle of an ox. So therefore, we stone them all. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's a very severe case. But in a case that, according to the rabbis, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, we put them into confinement. I want to learn the Rashi inside because the Gemara is missing a lot of the translation of what Rav is saying. So we learn the Rashi Elamar Rav. Elamar Rav. Rav says, "B'shaloi hukar lebezdin ka'amar." It's talking about a case that Bezdin doesn't know what happened. Kigoin, what would be an example? Shnaim oimdim, 2 people are standing. It doesn't go into the warning, but we assume they were warned. And the arrow gets shot out from amongst the 2 people. We don't know who shot the arrow. Shneim Peturim, both of them get patur, because we don't know who the case is, who the murderer is. And Rabbi Yossi says in such a case, Afilu Abba Chalafta Beinayim. Even if my father Chalafta is one of the 2, everyone knows that he's a righteous person. That he would never do such a thing. He would never even be vulnerable to do such a thing. We don't nevertheless sentence the other person and say, okay, well, if there's 2 people here, one is the super righteous Chalafta, and the other is who knows who. That assuming we're going to use that as enough of a reason to consider that person the murderer, because we know clearly there was an act of murder done, is we don't say that. Mishum hai chazaka. Because that's not a strong, because there's not enough strong chazaka to say that, because I know chazaka, a person's innocent until we know otherwise. But Rabbi Yehuda agrees with that. Rabbi Yehuda, the Amr Koinsin, I say, this is Rabbi Yehuda says that we confine him, Lakipa, to a confined space. It's not talking about that case. There's missing words in the Mishnah. There's words missing. This is what we say. And we add to that case that the rabbis are still talking. What about a case where an ox, shenigmar dina, that's already been sentenced and gets mixed up with other oxen that are innocent, so we kill all of them. Anyways, you can't take any benefit from any of the oxen. And there's no loss to the owners by stoning them, because you can't eat their meat, you can't sacrifice their meat, because there's a murder amongst them. The Torah says that's it. You can't just, if you have an ox that kills people, that gets mixed up in a pen of other oxen, and you say, well, it's mixed up, so therefore we're going to eat. No, they all become asr b'hana. You can't do anything with it. So if you can't do anything with it, so there's no loss to the owner if you're going to kill them all. We're not looking at this from the perspective of the animal. We're looking at this perspective of the ownership and the law. And the law of the Torah is that an animal that is even suspected of being a part of a group that could have killed someone, you're not allowed to you're not allowed to eat the meat, you're not allowed to take any hana. You're not allowed to take any, it's called a shar sheniskal. A shar that gets stoned, that gets mixed up, everything becomes forbidden. So there's no monetary value anymore to this group of animals to the owner. So you want to say, because why should we kill the animal just because we don't know? But we have a mitzvah. The mitzvah says we could perform a mitzvah. And the mitzvah, if you're going to stone every animal, or you're going to kill every animal, we're going to perform the mitzvah. According to the rabbis, if you're going to stone every animal, so you're going to perform the mitzvah of killing. So the rabbis say, Solkin oisa, we kill them all. We stone them all. There's no monetary loss to the owner. So we should be able to, if you're going to stone all of them, then you're going to stone the one that deserves stoning. And because you're going to stone the one that deserves stoning, you have an opportunity to perform the mitzvah. There's no monetary loss to the ownership. You're stoning 5 or 10 oxen that did nothing. The Torah doesn't look at it that way. The Torah looks at it as in the mitzvah. The mitzvah is being performed. the Ratzin of Hashem, the want of Hashem is being fulfilled, and that is that if an animal commits murder, it has to be stoned. And if there was a monetary loss hypothetically to the owner, so possibly the rabbis would say, okay, you can't take it. You can't to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of skila. You can't demand that a person should have a monetary loss, but there's no monetary loss because anyways you can't use the animals for anything. And Rabbi Yehuda says no. Kohen nice in the kippah, we don't stone them. She'ein tzarech l'solka and shloi l'hatriach bezdin. Bezdin doesn't have to go through this whole. Everything's from the perspective of the law. So Bezdin doesn't have to go through the tircha, through the toil of stoning a whole bunch of animals. They die according to Rashi of starvation. Okay. So this is so we had the three cases of Reish Lakish. Shmuel says we're talking about a murderer amongst other murderers. That's the argument of Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis. Reish Lakish says we're talking about just oxen that gets mixed up, intermingled with other oxen that have been already sentenced. And so Rabbi Yehuda, the rabbis have a chiddush that say that because you can't sentence him, so therefore there's nothing you could do. And according to the Rabbi Yehuda, we put them all in the kippah. And seemingly from Rashi, we put them all in the kippah, they get starved to death. And according to Rava says no. There's three scenarios in the Mishnah. One scenario of the Mishnah is if a person, out of two people is committed an act of murder. In such a case, so everyone agrees that there's because one person is innocent, there's nothing that you have to let the other person off. And even Rabbi Yossi adds if the person is righteous as his father Chalafta. According to then Rava adds a missing sentence in the Mishnah that says, but in the case of animals, where the animal is actually committed murder, it gets mixed up with other animals that did nothing, the rabbis say we stone all the animals, so we should be able to, because anyways there's no monetary loss, and we want to be able to perform the verse that says that we stone the animal. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Bezdin doesn't have to be preoccupied with sitting there and stoning a whole bunch of animals, so we could perform the mitzvah of skila. We just put them all into the pen and they get starved to death. But both according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to the rabbis, we kill the animals, all of them. Okay. Now we're gonna just do a little further another case. It says Vatanya, Rashi says b'nechusa. It's not a question yet. We learned para. So para means a female cow. Shamisa, that kills. And after she gives birth to a calf, after we don't know the case yet, but let's just read the case as we read it now. Is that a pregnant cow or a cow that eventually has a child killed another person? So now the Mishnah says, Im ad shalai nigmar dina yolda. Let's say she had the baby before they judged. It means the law was you judged the cow. You had to figure out with the story what happened. So the cow. And the owner of the cow. So the cow gets taken, and we find out. But before they were able to sentence the cow gave birth to a calf. It's a velad mutter. So then in that case, for sure, the calf is let go. You could do it. You don't kill the calf. The calf wasn't sentenced. But in the case where the cow was sentenced and afterwards the cow gives birth. Is Yalda, she gives birth, Vlada Aser, then the law is then because at the sentencing she's pregnant, and because of the sentencing she everything about her becomes forbidden, and that she's already considered a cow that has to be killed, and therefore even her calf is part of that punishment. So that sentencing. So now, what about Nis'arav Bacherim going to us in the kippah? And what happens if it gets? We don't know yet what this case is, but let's say it gets mixed up in others, and then others in others. Going to us in the kippah, then we put them all into a confined space, and let's say according to Rashi, they get starved to death. Rabbi Lazar bar Shimon Aimer. Rabbi Shimon says, no, we have to bring them all to the Bezdin, and we stone them. Again, to be able to perform the mitzvah of skila, which the verse says. That's the brisa that we learn. The reason why, if after the sentencing of the cow, it gives birth, that the uber is also is also, you can't use it. It says the uber yerach imoyu, a pregnant fetus of an animal inside its mother is like a limb. V'gam hu neser b'gmar dina imoy. When his mother was sentenced, he also becomes forbidden. Means you can't eat it. It's considered a animal. It has you can't have any enough of it. No. You can't have any monetary pleasure from this. Hold on a second. Let's see what the art scroll says on something here. 10, forbidden. Okay, doesn't say that we kill the fetus, but it's considered forbidden, which means you're not allowed to use it for any foods or sacrifices, etc. I'm going to check the commentaries over here if that's right. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Says the Gemara is going to explain soon. Okay, let's go a little further. Amar Mar, we learned before. Let me just see how much further this goes. If not, we'll stop here. Hold on. Okay, let's go. We'll go try to finish the 2 dots. We'll try to get this a little fast. Amar Mar, we learned before. It says, nigmar if we haven't sentenced the cow yet, Yalda, Vlada Muteris, the calf is permitted. You could use it for whatever you want. And you want to say if that's the case, even if she was pregnant when she killed someone, let's say she gored someone to death, and she was pregnant with this calf, and then you sentence, and then it gives birth, and then it gets sentenced. You could just, like, the calf gets off. Rava says, Vlad hanagechas aser, a fetus, a calf of a goring cow that kills someone is forbidden. She's forbidden Vlada, and also it's also the calf. Nakhu Vlad Vlad and Agechas Aser he Vlad and Nakhu Vlad. Both of them are considered he Vlad and Nakhu. Both she and the fetus, because the calf at the moment while she was pregnant was part of the body of the mother, so it was also part of the goring. It was like a limb, part of the animal that gored. So therefore, if the mother sentenced that you can't, it's forbidden. You can't use the animal either. You can't use the calf either. Vlad hanirvas. What about a calf of an animal that was molested? Aser he vlada. Vlad hanir va'as aser. If you have a child of a cow that is been molested or it molests, so then it's forbidden. He vlada nirvu ima. He vlada nirvu. Both she and the while the mother was pregnant, she was part of the story because she was pregnant with this calf. Ima he vlada nirvu ima achla nigmar. Ema. So what do we say? If she only got pregnant after their sentencing, Vlada Mutar, Imishinigma Dina Ibra Vialda Vlada Asar. The Gemara says like this. Ema, let's say, if they haven't yet sentenced the cow, and Ibra Vialda, she gets pregnant after the goring, and she gives birth, and they haven't sentenced, then Vladimorta, then surely the animal is permitted because it wasn't part of the story. It gored before and it got sentenced later, and in the meantime she got pregnant and gave birth. And if after you already sentenced the cow, Ibra Vialda, so then she gets pregnant and she gives birth, Vlada Aser, then the child's obviously forbidden. Why? Because it's an animal that's forbidden. So that animal itself gives birth to an animal gets pregnant, gives birth to an animal, then it's the whole story is forbidden. So the Gemara says, that's okay according to the opinion Aser, that if you have the father of this calf didn't do anything, it didn't murder anyone, it didn't do any damage. So the father, but the mother did. So therefore, if the cow committed murder and then that cow got pregnant and gave birth, so just like the cow, the mother is forbidden, the child's forbidden. That's only according to the opinion that we don't take into consideration the father. That means zev is goyim. If we have two people cause the animal to be born, there's the father who impregnated the woman. Nevertheless, the mother, the female cow, but nevertheless, it's we don't consider the father in this case. But according to the Gemara, we're just going to go faster. But according to the opinion that the father, meaning the male cow, was permitted, didn't do anything wrong. So therefore, why should we sentence the child just because the mother committed murder? What can we say? So basically, he's saying they're asking a case. That what is the case of the pregnancy? So what is the case of the Mishnah? So we say like this: if the cow becomes pregnant and gives birth after it commits the crime, before it's sentenced, so there's no sentencing, so the animal, nothing was wrong. If it committed the crime after and was sentenced and then got pregnant and gave birth, so according to the opinion that says we don't consider the male cow. So therefore, the animal is like its mother, and it's forbidden. It means you can't use it for eating or sacrifices. So Ravina says, "Ema im nigmar dina." If they haven't yet finished the sentencing, ibra biyolda vladimorter. If they haven't finished the sentencing and the cow becomes pregnant, gives birth, so the cow is permitted. Im nigmar dina ibra. If she gets pregnant before the sentencing, and then when she gets sentenced, she gives birth. Then it is forbidden because when it's sentenced the mother, the female. Okay, we went a little fast in this case, but the point is that according to this Mishnah, that there's you have a minute here? We're going to learn the Rashi. If you want to stay along so we can understand this case a bit better. V'amar Rav, we're going to learn the Rashi V'amar Rav. Rav, what's the case of this that we're talking about? V'amar Rav, v'la negachas aser. What does it mean aser? B'hakrava. You can't use the calf of a mother that was sentenced to death for a carbon. He gives an example. Shenakcha api eidachat. What is the case that you can't use the mother? The mother's forbidden. It means you don't kill the mother. Why? Let's say a case where there's only one witness that this cow killed someone. Or the actual owners come to the bezdin and say, my cow killed a person. So the misaser legoiva v'loy lehedyet. It's not. There's no witnesses. So therefore, you can't use it as a carbon, but for a person it's permitted. The is edim, but if there would be witnesses, you wouldn't be able to eat the animal itself, the mother, the child itself. Sorry, people. I think we're going to have to go back on this case next week because it seems a little more complicated than when I initially learned it. So we're going to go back. I'm going to mark this space on V'hamar Rava. Sorry about that, guys. Or Amar Mar on page 81. And we'll do the Rashi's next class. All right, everyone. Sorry about that. Have a lovely evening. And thank you for joining. I'll post the video after it's uploaded. Take care. Laila Tov.